Imagine for a moment that you're standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier somewhere in the Persian Gulf. The horizon is calm, but above it, hundreds of miles away, tiny drones and missiles are already in motion, each costing a fraction of what it takes to intercept them. One Shahed 136 loitering drone built from commercial components for $30,000 is heading toward a target worth millions. To stop it, the US fires a single Patriot PAC-3 missile, $3.7 million, to neutralize a threat that's 125 times cheaper than the cost of defense. Sit with that math for a moment. This is not science fiction, this is real. And this is how America is quietly eroding its own military advantage while the world's attention is fixed elsewhere. 3 decades ago, the United States was unmatched in global power projection. Its industrial base, technological edge, and military doctrine created a fortress impossible to penetrate. Today, however, the fortress looks intact only on the surface. When you peel back the layers, the cracks are alarming. Every interceptor fired, every precision-guided missile launched in the Middle East is a slow drain on the very arsenal designed to secure the nation's position against its true competitor, China. Consider Nevatim Air Base in Israel's Negev Desert. This is not just an air base. It is arguably the most valuable piece of military real estate in the world. 3 squadrons of F-35I Adir stealth fighters, 39 aircraft valued at $96 million each, sit there. $3.7 billion in jets alone, not including the hardened shelters, intelligence centers, and maintenance depots that make the base a fortress. Iran doesn't need to destroy half of it. One successful strike that grounds a few aircraft is enough to erode Israel's offensive capability in the region. And each attempt to stop these strikes forces the US and Israel to burn through systems that are expensive, limited, and slow to produce. THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, costs $12.7 million per interceptor. A single battery is a $1 billion investment. Yet in early March 2026, just 10 days into the conflict, American and Israeli forces fired 92 THAAD missiles. That's 5 to 7 years of production in a matter of days. The factories cannot simply ramp up production overnight. The materials, precision components, and highly specialized engineering require time measured in years. The numbers are stark. The cost-exchange ratio between attacker and defender in this theater favors Iran by 48.1. In the harshest calculations, it rises to 85.1. Every intercepted missile is a temporary victory, but it leaves an empty magazine behind. And when the next salvo comes, the defender cannot respond at the same scale. At the same time, the Iranian regime faces its own internal challenges. In the Zagros Mountains along the western frontier, 9 to 10 million Kurds live under decades of economic neglect and cultural suppression. Veteran fighters, trained over decades in small unit tactics and previously trained by US instructors during anti-ISIS campaigns, form a coalition intent on undermining Tehran's control. While the world focuses on missiles over the Persian Gulf, a second front quietly develops in the mountains, forcing Iran to stretch its resources, dilute its defenses, and divert manpower away from its southern assets. From a tactical standpoint, this is a masterstroke. But from a strategic perspective for the United States, it creates a permanent entanglement. A Kurdish insurgency demands constant intelligence, supply lines, and political management across multiple borders. It is not a problem that can be turned off once the missiles stop flying. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, China is executing a patient, methodical strategy. While billions are spent intercepting drones in the Middle East, Beijing quietly expands its industrial and military capacity. Consider the numbers. The China State Shipbuilding Corporation alone built more commercial vessels by tonnage in 2024 than the entire US shipbuilding industry has produced since World War II. Its shipbuilding capacity is 230 times greater than America's, creating a pool of industrial expertise, supply chains, and trained workers that directly translates into naval power. China doesn't need to fire a single shot. Every ship in Shanghai's shipyards, every tanker or container vessel, trains its workforce, hones its logistics, and expands capacity that will eventually feed the People's Liberation Army Navy. The Type 052D destroyer, a 7,500-ton warship, is being produced at a rate nearly twice that of the U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. China already has 10 Type 055 super destroyers, capable of 112 vertical launch cells and over-the-horizon strike. The U.S. equivalent, the Zumwalt class, is capped at 3 due to cost overruns and technical difficulties. And the missile picture is equally concerning. DF-26 intermediate-range ballistic missiles, designed specifically to target U.S. aircraft carriers from over 4,000 kilometers, number over 250. These are not hypothetical threats. They are operational systems that render traditional American naval superiority in the Western Pacific increasingly expensive and risky. Now, consider what the U.S. is doing to its own long-range strike capabilities. Tomahawk cruise missiles, the backbone of standoff operations, are produced at only 72 units per year, each taking 2 years to manufacture. In 2003, the U.S. fired 800 Tomahawks in Iraq. At today's production rate, replacing that expenditure would take over a decade. In early 2026, just 3 days of high-intensity operations in the Middle East consumed an estimated 10% of the entire ready-to-fire inventory. 5 years of production gone in 72 hours. Imagine what happens if a crisis erupts in the Taiwan Strait tomorrow. The U.S. Navy would arrive with racks already partially emptied. Even operational costs compound the issue. Maintaining 2 carrier strike groups in the Middle East costs $13 million per day. That's fuel, personnel, maintenance, and depreciation, not even counting munitions or airstrikes. During the peak of the 2025-2026 crisis, these 2 carrier groups consumed 41% of all U.S. Navy global carrier steaming days, 41% in the wrong theater, leaving the Pacific under-resourced at a moment when Beijing's maritime strategy is accelerating. The lesson is clear. Defending against low-cost, asymmetric attacks in the Middle East is draining U.S. capabilities for the theater that truly matters. Every missile fired, every dollar spent, is a transfer of strategic advantage to Beijing, not Tehran. This is the essence of modern economic warfare applied to military operations. While generals report 99% interception rates, accountants see empty magazines. While politicians celebrate tactical victories, strategists see a slow erosion of industrial capacity and global readiness. Imagine, if you will, that the next time the U.S. needs to project power in the Western Pacific, it arrives with its missile magazines partially depleted, production pipelines already consumed, and carrier strike groups stretched across the wrong ocean. That's not a prediction. That's a calculation. Every American asset tied up in the Middle East is an asset unavailable where it counts most. Now ask yourself, how long can the U.S. continue this pattern before the structural imbalances become operational realities? How long before the industrial capacity, long considered the backbone of American power, cannot meet the demands of 2 simultaneous theaters? And how quietly, in the meantime, China continues to build, expand, and position itself to take advantage of every misstep, every misallocation, every dollar and missile fired at the wrong enemy. This is the paradox of modern conflict. Tactical victories can conceal strategic weakness. Interception success rates can mask industrial depletion. Short-term triumphs can create long-term vulnerability. And the world's most powerful economy and military might not even realize it until the pivot point arrives. And when it does, the ledger will reveal the truth. Every dollar spent defending a $150,000 missile with a $12 million interceptor was a step towards strategic exhaustion. And every ton of shipyard capacity in Shanghai was a quiet bet against American dominance. So, as you watch the news, follow the headlines, and track the Middle East conflict, remember this: the battle being reported is not the battle that matters most. The real calculation is happening quietly, methodically, and globally. The numbers are public. Production rates, industrial capacity, missile inventories, shipbuilding statistics. They tell the story if you know how to read them. And those who do read them will understand a critical truth. The U.S. is engaged in a costly distraction while China positions itself to dominate the theater that defines the 21st century balance of power. What does this mean for investors, for retirement portfolios, for anyone concerned about the preservation of wealth? Consider the broader picture. Geopolitical stability underpins global markets. Every misstep in strategic allocation, every depletion of defense industrial capacity, and every unheeded advantage quietly accumulated by a rival power reverberates through the financial system. Stock markets, commodities, currencies, and risk premiums are all influenced by these structural realities. When the cost of defense escalates, budgets shift, and economic priorities adjust, every investor feels the ripple. And here's the micro hook for you. Most Americans will never see the spreadsheets that reveal this imbalance. They won't see the depletion of missile inventories, the slow burn of industrial capacity, or the quiet expansion of China's naval forces. They will see headlines about intercepted drones, tactical victories, and political resolve. But the true story, the one that will matter to investors and citizens alike, is being written in factories, shipyards, and missile assembly lines thousands of miles away. Pause here and reflect. If just 3 days of Middle East combat can consume 5 years of cruise missile production, what does that imply about the U.S.'s capacity to respond to a simultaneous crisis elsewhere? And if China continues to expand its industrial and military base at its current pace, what does that mean for American strategic leverage over the next decade? The answer is neither hypothetical nor speculative. It is in the numbers. It is in the production rates. It is in the balance sheets and the factories and the empty missile magazines. This is not fear-mongering. It is economic and strategic reality. And understanding this reality is critical not only for military planners, but for anyone invested in the stability of global markets and the preservation of wealth. Now, before we continue, I want to hear your take. Comment below, do you see this as a temporary misallocation of resources or a fundamental structural issue? What would you do if you were in charge of balancing these competing demands? And make sure you follow the story. This is just the first part of a deeper exploration. Because the truth is this: the Middle East conflict is only one side of the ledger. The other side is unfolding silently in East Asia, in shipyards, missile assembly lines, and training facilities. The US may be winning in the headlines, but the strategic math tells a different story, and that story will have real consequences for global power, economic stability, and every portfolio exposed to the tides of geopolitical risk. The next segment will dive deeper into the mechanics of this shift, how China's industrial dominance translates into operational power, the precise vulnerabilities in America's arsenal, and what that means for the balance of global influence over the next decade. Stay tuned, because this is where the numbers get even more striking, and where the stakes become impossible to ignore. And, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. This is the story that doesn't get told in mainstream headlines, and it's the one that could change how you view global economics, investing, and the real cost of modern warfare. Now, imagine the moment after the headlines fade. The world celebrates tactical victories, missiles intercepted, drones destroyed, strategic facilities unharmed. But behind the scenes, a different story is unfolding. The magazines are emptying faster than the factories can replenish them. Every Tomahawk fired, every THAAD and Patriot missile launched in the Middle East is a drain on stockpiles that were designed for a global contingency, not a regional distraction. Let's break down the numbers. In just 3 days of high-intensity operations in early 2026, U.S. naval forces expended roughly 180 Standard missiles, 90 Patriot rounds, and 40 THAAD interceptors. That represents 10% of the Navy's ready-to-fire Tomahawk inventory, 5 years of production gone in less than a week. Production pipelines are not faucets that can be turned up at will. Precision-guided munitions require exotic materials, specialized labor, and years of engineering to manufacture. And while America burns through its stockpiles, China quietly multiplies its capabilities in a way that is methodical, patient, and unstoppable. Consider the Chinese naval buildup. In Shanghai and Wuhan, commercial shipyards are producing tankers, container vessels, and bulk carriers at a scale that dwarfs U.S. industrial capacity. This commercial output serves a dual purpose. It generates revenue, yes, but more importantly, it builds organizational expertise, hones supply chains, and trains workers in processes that directly translate into warship production. Each civilian ship built is a rehearsal, a step in a much larger strategic calculation. China's Type 052D destroyers are produced at a rate nearly twice that of the U.S. Arleigh Burke class. Their Type 055 super destroyers, each with 112 vertical launch cells, are already deployed in double the number of America's equivalent platforms. The math is unambiguous. While U.S. forces expend assets at tactical cost ratios of 48.1 or 85.1 in the Middle East, China's accumulation of industrial, naval, and missile capabilities is nearly frictionless. The DF-26 missile is another quiet game changer. Intermediate range, carrier killer capable of reaching over 4,000 kilometers. These missiles are already deployed in numbers exceeding 250. Imagine a scenario in which U.S. carriers attempt to operate near China's coast. Every day at sea becomes exponentially riskier. Every rack of Tomahawks expended in the Middle East is one less tool available for the Pacific. Every $1 billion spent defending against low-cost, asymmetric threats in the Gulf is $1 billion not invested in hypersonic research, advanced naval vessels, or missile production. America is voluntarily weakening itself in the theater that matters most, while China does nothing but build. And the operational costs are staggering. 2 carrier strike groups in the Middle East cost $13 million per day, not including munitions or airstrikes. They absorb 41% of global U.S. carrier steaming days, leaving the Pacific with fewer assets precisely when strategic competition there is intensifying. Every deployment in the wrong theater comes with invisible costs: reduced readiness, slower response times, and increased vulnerability. In economic terms, it's a misallocation of capital on a global scale. Meanwhile, back in Iran, the Kurdish front creates another layer of complexity. Veteran Kurdish fighters, organized under the coalition of political forces of Iranian Kurdistan, are exploiting decades of terrain knowledge, insurgency experience, and U.S. training. This creates a low-cost, high-impact internal challenge for Iran. Each battalion Tehran must divert from the south to secure the Zagros Mountains is a battalion not defending missile batteries near the Persian Gulf or along Israel's border. From a tactical standpoint, it's elegant. Iran is forced to fight on 2 fronts. From a strategic standpoint, it's a trap. Supporting the Kurdish insurgency means long-term entanglement for the United States. Intelligence, supply chains, political management across Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. It's a permanent commitment with no clean exit. This is the fundamental paradox of modern great power competition. Tactical victories are being celebrated publicly, but strategic weaknesses are accumulating quietly. America is spending resources in the Middle East that will be desperately needed in the Pacific. China, observing silently, benefits from a simple, patient equation. Industrial capacity plus strategic patience equals leverage. The US is depleting itself on a conflict that cannot define global power, while China strengthens its position where it counts. Consider the investment implications. Defense and economic stability are intertwined. Every ton of industrial output diverted, every munition stockpile consumed, and every carrier day spent in the Gulf affects the global economy. Markets respond to strategic risk, volatility increases, risk premiums rise, and investor confidence shifts. Tactical military success in one region can create long-term economic vulnerabilities elsewhere. Pension funds, retirement accounts, and global investment portfolios are all exposed to these unseen shifts in global power. Understanding these numbers isn't just about geopolitics, it's about financial foresight. Let's return to the operational picture in the Middle East. The cost to intercept a $150,000 Zulfahar missile with a $12 million THAAD interceptor is not just a tactical inefficiency, it's a structural flaw. The U.S. produces 12 to 18 THAAD missiles per year. In just 10 days of conflict, 92 missiles were fired. The deficit can't be repaired quickly. Production will not catch up until April 2027. Every salvo in the Gulf accelerates this depletion. Every tactical victory is a strategic drawdown. And meanwhile, China's capacity for shipbuilding, missile deployment, and naval expansion grows silently, uninterrupted, and exponentially. Now, imagine a simultaneous crisis in the Taiwan Strait. What assets will be available? How many Tomahawks will be in stock? How many THAAD batteries ready? How many Arleigh Burke-class destroyers? The answer is sobering, fewer than in a fully prepared scenario. Every asset consumed elsewhere is a liability in the theater that will define 21st century global power. This isn't conjecture, it is arithmetic, logistics, and strategic reality. And here's the critical insight. The numbers are visible if you know where to look. U.S. military production rates, inventory levels, shipbuilding capacity, and munitions stockpiles are all public. China's industrial expansion is documented in trade reports, satellite imagery, and construction data. The arithmetic is clear. While public narratives celebrate interception rates and tactical success, the strategic ledger is shifting. The United States is quietly weakening itself relative to the challenger that matters most. The Middle East is a theater of distraction. Tactical victories there are pyrrhic. They consume expensive interceptors and long-range missiles, drain the industrial base, and stretch carrier strike groups thin. Meanwhile, China does what it has done for decades: build, produce, and wait. Each shipyard launch, each missile deployment, each commercial vessel contributes to long-term strategic leverage. And unlike tactical operations in the Gulf, these moves are sustainable, exponential, and irreversible in the near term. Pause and consider the implications for global economics. Markets do not operate in isolation from strategic realities. Defense expenditure, industrial allocation, and geopolitical readiness all feed into risk assessments, commodity prices, and investment confidence. Every misallocation in military resources has a financial echo. Investors, particularly those focused on wealth preservation, must understand these structural shifts. Tactical victories may feel reassuring, but they are transactions that drain capital, deplete stockpiles, and reallocate global strategic power. And there's another layer: political entanglement. By supporting the Kurdish front, the United States commits to long-term involvement in Iran's internal affairs. Permanent entanglement creates ongoing operational costs, intelligence requirements, and diplomatic complexity across neighboring states with their own Kurdish populations. Unlike missile stockpiles, these commitments cannot be replenished or reallocated. They are continuous obligations, demanding attention, manpower, and resources. All of this is happening while the U.S. military celebrates interception rates, readiness, and tactical triumphs. The optics are reassuring. 99% of incoming missiles destroyed, drone attacks neutralized, strategic facilities unharmed. But the invisible ledger tells a different story. Every missile fired in the Middle East, every dollar spent defending low-cost threats, every operational asset diverted is a strategic cost that accumulates silently. It leaves the U.S. weaker in the theater that will define global power. Meanwhile, China's strategy is quiet, patient, and almost invisible. Its shipyards are producing at rates unmatchable by the United States. Its missile systems are fielded in numbers that shift the strategic balance. Its commercial industrial base directly supports military expansion. It does not need to fight a tactical war to win the long-term strategic game. The arithmetic is simple. Production rates plus patience equal leverage. And America, by contrast, is depleting its arsenal in a theater of distraction. The implications for investors, for policymakers, and for citizens are profound. This isn't a distant, abstract problem. It is a present, tangible reality that affects global stability, financial markets, and the preservation of wealth. Every tactical decision in the Middle East has strategic, economic, and financial consequences. Every missile launched, every carrier deployed, every intercept performed feeds into a larger narrative of depletion and strategic disadvantage. And yet, the public narrative rarely acknowledges this. Headlines celebrate interception rates and tactical success. Analysts and accountants, the ones looking at production numbers and industrial capacity, understand the silent cost, but the broader audience does not. That gap in understanding has consequences for investment decisions, portfolio management, and the anticipation of geopolitical risk. So here's the challenge. How do you prepare for a world where tactical victories hide structural weaknesses? How do you invest, protect wealth, and make decisions in an environment where strategic power is quietly shifting across oceans and continents? Understanding the arithmetic of depletion, industrial capacity, and long-term leverage is the key. Tactical news is distraction. Strategic data is insight. Comment below and share your thoughts. Do you see this as temporary misallocation or a fundamental shift in global power dynamics? How would you weigh short-term tactical victories against long-term strategic depletion? Follow the story. This is just the beginning, because the next part will reveal exactly how China's patient expansion translates into operational dominance, the naval capabilities, the missile networks, the industrial leverage that will define global power over the next decade. This is where the numbers tell the full story, where the arithmetic of modern warfare meets the economics of global influence, and where understanding the ledger becomes essential to understanding the future. And if you haven't already, subscribe. This is the analysis that doesn't appear in headlines, but it will define global economics, investing, and the real cost of modern warfare for years to come.